They didn't plan it that way, but they do work together at Liberty Institute. We have Kelly Shackelford here in studio and also Michael Berry. And both of them are, they're hard at work during the weeks, fighting for our religious liberties. And we're going to talk about some of those cases today. Kelly, thanks for being here.
Oh, it's great to be here.
And so we've missed you. You've been out a couple of weeks, and I know Kirby will be sad that he's not here with both of you. Michael Berry is also here. And Michael and Kelly are attorneys, and they are both experts in the Constitution. Kelly's been doing religious liberty law for, about 25 years?
Yeah, 25 years.
And Michael has been an attorney in the United States Marines. And has Mike, you've always had as sort of an interest fighting religious liberty cases, haven't you, even since college?
Well, yeah. I mean, when I was in law school, I actually experienced my own, form of religious hostility, and ever since then, it's been a seed that was planted in me, and I knew this is what I wanted to do.
Well, we're glad both of you are here. It's a real treat to have both of you. So we're going to get right to those cases. I mean, later in the program, we will talk about the Supreme Court's decision not to protect marriage laws of states, because I know you guys will have a lot to say about it. But I want to go to Liberty Institute cases, especially the big victory. And Kelly, why don't you start on Long Island, New York?
Yeah, this is a really remarkable case. I mean, I think most point of view listeners are aware that the Equal Access Act makes it clear under federal law that if you have any sort of student club that's a non-curricular club, in other words, not the Spanish club, but if you have any other kind of club, which every school pretty much has, then you have to allow the Christian club or the Bible club, and you can't treat them differently.
That's something that we talked about like 15 years ago here on Point of View.
And so it was a little shocking when last year we got a call from a very enterprising young man, who had gone, there are 33 clubs. He presented his application like everybody else, and everybody else was notified within the time period they were told, except for him. And he kept going and asking, and his mom asked, and finally he was brought into the office and told, well, you can't have your club. It violates the law and separation of church and state, So obviously the principal and the assistant principal didn't know the law, and they just tried to make something up. But John is a very bright young man. He had already researched the law. He already knew the answer, and he said, no, that's not right. So when they they did shut him down from having his club, which violates the law and is religious discrimination, he was able to contact Liberty Institute, and we actually sent a letter. And it was fairly amazing. It took less than 7 hours for the school district to reverse what they had been doing him the entire year. And he had his club at the end of last year.
So he didn't get to operate throughout the year.
That's right.
It took the whole year?
Yeah, he didn't know where exactly to turn. It took him that long to find out. He doesn't listen to Point of View and doesn't know. You can call Liberty Institute, and we'll help you for free. And so we did that, and you would think, therefore, it's over, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, this year all the clubs have to reapply, and he was doing the same thing, and they denied him this year. And this is while they granted everybody else, the Gay Straight Alliance, the Frisbee Club was one of the, yeah. I mean, those are all fine, but this year, no, you can't have your club. And some of the rationale that we were given were fairly amazing in and of themselves. One of them was that they have a union contract, and when they have clubs, they have to pay teachers to be, one of the supervisors of those clubs. And so they decided to only, do clubs that had 20 or more people coming regularly, and they didn't think that, well, number one, their other clubs, like the Gay Straight Alliance, didn't have very many people either. And it was it was really religious discrimination. But number two, we just thought, what an interesting argument that in the United States, you're allowed to meet unless you're a minority group. I mean, I don't think that's a very good First Amendment position to take for the school. So it's only the ones that are really popular that get to meet. But if you have different ideas and you have a smaller group, you don't. I mean, that wasn't going to play either. So we sent the letter again this year, and we said, we can't believe we're having to do this again. But, we're going to give you, this was Monday, we're going to give you, a couple of days, or it might have been Tuesday, to make your decision, or else we're going to have to go to court, because you should be aware of this by now. This is twice we've had to do this. And yesterday, the school district reversed their decision, stopped banning the club, and John's club, the Students United in Faith, is now allowed to meet like everybody else.
And I bet it's going to be a very popular club now. Ladies and gentlemen, you can find the story that was written by Fox News' Todd Starnes up on our website at pointofview.net. And Michael, I want to go to you on this. This is so interesting because, of course, we're also proud of these young men that stand up for their rights. And, maybe they'll become attorneys for a religious liberty law firm like you did, because you had to do the same thing in college, didn't you?
Absolutely. That's right. And I think it's amazing what this young man did. The fact that he had the foresight and the knowledge to look up what the law said before he went to meet with his principal. And then when faced with that kind of pushback, from a school principal is quite an influential and powerful person, at least in a public high school, and to say, well, no, that's actually not right. I think the law says that we can have this club, and that there are other students who want to meet, and for the school to come back and basically their argument boils down to, well, the Constitution doesn't begin to apply until you reach 20 people in your club, and then you can have your constitutional rights, which to me is just outrageous.
So your colleague Hiram Sasser's quote is, John Rainey and Jeremy Johnson, the two leaders, may just be high school students, but they did more for liberty than all of Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and I had the privilege of, within the last couple of days, I was in Long Island, which is where John is, where his mom was. And we got to actually meet with John and his mom.
You did?
And just was blown away with the how sharp this young man is, how fearless, really. His whole idea is, this is about the glory of the Lord, and he's got a purpose in this, and I'm not going to back down because this is what he wanted me to do. And I got an email. We got an email from John yesterday that said, because of what has happened, it's actually increased dramatically the interest in his club, and he thinks it's going to be much larger than it ever has been before. So God did have a purpose in him standing his ground in a respectful way. And now there's going to be even more people meeting Students United in Faith.
When I was in high school, it was the kids rebelling against the adult and the kids were usually doing something sinful or edgy. And now it's often the kids who are doing the right thing and the adults who are doing the wrong thing. So it's great to see this. It's great to see their courage. Ladies and gentlemen, later in the program, we've got so many topics. I'll give you a little bit of a preview. At the bottom of the hour, we're going to talk about network coverage of some of our news items, like the Ebola situation, and also that Supreme Court decision that we've been talking about all week, not to hear appeals on gay marriage. And then later, we're going to talk to the producer of a new movie coming out called Unfair about the IRS. It ought to be interesting. And then, of course, we will talk about this marriage decision. I've been waiting all week to talk to Michael and Kelly about their take on it. So we've got all of that. We'll bring in a little bit of the Ebola crisis, too. What do you think about this screening? Is that going to take care of it, or do we need something more? All of that coming up here on Point of View. Stay with us.
The Point of View Commentary with Kirby Anderson.
Perhaps you've read the short story of I, Pencil by economist Leonard Read. He takes you through all the steps necessary to make a pencil and concludes that nobody knows how to make a pencil. To make something as simple as a pencil requires knowledge and technological expertise in fields ranging from forestry to mining to engineering to chemistry. And yet pencils are made day after day, even though no one knows the whole process from start to finish. The worker on the assembly line doesn't know all the steps. Even the president of the pencil manufacturing company doesn't know all that is necessary to make a pencil. There's no central authority. All of the necessary steps come together in a free market through what looks like spontaneous order. Kevin Williamson, in a recent column, talks about how the market worked to provide us with so much more than just pencils. When he speaks to students, he shows them a still from the Oliver Stone movie Wall Street. The financier Gordon Gekko is talking on a cell phone, the Motorola Dynex 8000. The students always laugh. There's good reason. The phone is more than a foot long and weighs a couple of pounds. But here's the point. In the day in which the movie was shot, you had to be a millionaire to have one. The phone cost the equivalent of $10,000. It also cost more than $1,000 a month to operate. You couldn't put it in your pocket. You couldn't text on it. You couldn't get on the internet on it. You couldn't play Angry Birds on it. Most of the students have a smartphone that does that and much, much more. Every day they hold in their hands a technological wonder, especially compared to what only the rich and privileged few could use a few years ago. And while the price of nearly everything is going up, the price of these phones has dropped dramatically. It is worth mentioning that if no one knows how to make a pencil, it is certainly true that nobody knows how to make a smartphone. Yet we have them in our hands because of the free market. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter. I've had the privilege of sitting in the host chair all week, and Kirby's gone. He'll be back on Monday. And today I have Kelly Shackelford and Michael Berry from Liberty Institute with me. And I'm so glad because we want to kind of unpack the Supreme Court decision not to decide, not to really protect the laws, the state laws passed by the people of various states. Those laws were struck down. Those laws define marriages between one man and one woman and just protect the people's rights to define marriage. And these, these judges are striking them down all over the place. So we were a lot of us were looking to see what the Supreme Court would do. And Kelly, I'll start with you. I mean, first of all, were you kind of hoping the court would take these, or were you a little skeptical that even the Supreme Court would do the right thing?
Yeah, I would, because people talk about this all week, and I saw a lot of articles, and really you have to separate sort of the practical side from the what is right and wrong side. The practical side is, I didn't think the court was going to take this, because the court typically only takes a case when one federal court of appeals or more says one thing and another court of appeals or more says the opposite thing, because then what you have is you have the law or the Constitution meaning something different depending upon what state you're in, and that's something we shouldn't have. So the court gets about 9,000 requests a year. They only take 90 cases. So very difficult to get them to take your case. Well, the most common thing that tells you whether they take the case is this circuit split, this differences in the circuits.
So we have not had, like for instance, in Texas, we have an overwhelmingly passed law saying that marriage is between a man and a woman, and you don't have to recognize the gay marriages from other states. And our law has not been, it's been challenged, but
Yes.
the Fifth Circuit, which is the circuit that covers our state and Louisiana, I guess, in Mississippi,
right.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
That one hasn't decided.
That's right.
That's not gone to the Fifth Circuit yet, or they haven't decided.
right.
Now, the Fifth Circuit very well could uphold ours.
They could, and that would create a circuit split. And
Okay.
the Sixth Circuit also has one, so they could create that. Now, the other thing I would say for point of view listeners, most point of view listeners, that would want, these, these decisions by these judges that many of us consider very activist, creating these rights in the Constitution and saying that you can't have marriage be a man and a woman. I would say you look at the court, okay? Do you really want them to take this case?
Because want Anthony Kennedy to decide this.
He's the swing vote, right? Anthony Kennedy, Justice Kennedy is the swing vote, and he's the one who's decided Lawrence v. Texas. He's the one who decided the Colorado case, Romer case. I mean, he has been the leader, and he is the swing vote. He has been the leader on all the new homosexual rights decisions. So really, I think on the pragmatic side, a lot of people would probably say, I really don't expect them to take it. There's not a circuit split. And And if you're on the side of keeping marriage man and a woman, you probably don't want this court to take it. You're hoping that the court will change somehow, because the odds are probably not very good if they take this. On the what is right side, yes, I mean, this is unbelievable what you have happening. You have 30 states who are having their laws overturned by activist decisions that aren't based upon any words in the Constitution. They're based upon, this new, we're going to decide what's right and wrong as judges, which is totally inappropriate. This should be left to the states. It's not covered in the Constitution, and therefore it's a public policy matter. But what is happening, because the court is not acting as they should, is 30 states are going to be forced to basically say, we don't really care what you and your state vote. We, the judges, or in a lot of cases, maybe one judge or two judges, are deciding for your whole state on this huge public policy issue. And that's not the way our system was supposed to work.
Michael, what worries me is that the gay marriages are going to start in all these states that voted against it. Will that happen, do you think?
Well, certainly there's the potential for that to happen. I mean, we've already seen some states saying, okay, they're going to have to reverse course now. And, I think Nevada was one that I saw in the news that said, well, we may have to rethink what happened before, despite the fact that, our citizens voted one way. Now we have a court saying that we have to do something different. The real problem with that, though, is, as Kelly mentioned earlier, is that now it's going to leave people kind of in limbo. And the status of the law across our nation is yet to be clarified by the Supreme Court. And I also agree, though, that from a purely practical standpoint, that perhaps we want to wait a little bit for the composure of the court to find out, who's going to be on the court for the foreseeable future beforehand. So. Without being too alarmist and trying to settle some of the nerves and not have the sky is falling mentality, I think really all this means, from just the purely realist, practical point of view, is that there were not enough votes on the Supreme Court for this particular case at this particular time.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that they can't or won't take it up in the future.
Now, this reticence to take the case, a lot of people talked about, and even Ruth Bader Ginsburg has talked about, she doesn't want it to be like the Roe versus Wade decision, because what that did was spark this. She's a liberal, and of course she would love to have gay marriage, the law of the land. But the Supreme Court decided Roe versus Wade, and we've had this tremendous pro-life movement that's changed public opinion over the decades. And so, I guess some people think that they don't want that. They want this to happen more naturally or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting statement from Justice Ginsburg, at the outset, that, that I'm not really quite sure what she meant by, I don't want this to be another Roe versus Wade. What does, I would want to know, what does she mean by that? Does she mean in terms of the kind of the public groundswell of support for pro-life movements that resulted from Roe versus Wade? Or does she mean simply that she didn't want the court to have to be the one to kind of decide morality for everybody else? So I'm not sure. I think we have an idea what she meant, but again, I think that that's certainly potential as well, is that if this is quote unquote shoved down everybody's throats, that there is a great potential for there to be a backlash, and that people will begin realizing what's happening and that they've been sold a false bill of goods.
Yeah, I saw two really interesting articles this week. One was a law professor who's actually pro same-sex, marriage, who had written pretty powerfully that these cases are illegitimate. That they're when you use the courts to force your way on people, he said it's really a bad idea also, because you're not going to win the argument that way. You've got to change hearts and minds. And so it was fascinating, because he was being very truthful and honest, although he's for changing it. He was talking about how the law doesn't support what's going on here. Thought that was very fascinating. He wrote very persuasively. The other is the article that has analyzed that you've got this movement, that everybody's seen on the issue of, gay marriage, but it's actually stopped. And there's concern in the article about, they said, this very well could be another, this could be an abortion-like situation, where what you had this sort of popular notion going one way, pro-abortion, but you had these individuals in the country that weren't basing what they believed on popularity or on anything else, but because of a moral truth, that they knew that taking innocent lives were wrong, and they weren't going to budge off that. And so you'd see the polls go, and then it stops.
And that may be happening.
That may be exactly what's happening on the issue of, homosexual marriage. Is you see the polls going one way, but then now you're not seeing a move by this almost 50% of the country, because it's not based upon whims or culture or whatever. It's based upon moral foundational truths that marriage is a man and a woman. And so it's an interesting article, because it was positing, is this going to be like racism, where it took over and the swell went, or is this going to be like abortion, where you had this start and this momentum, and then it's actually turned the other way? Fascinating, the difference between those two. Racism is morally wrong, okay? But abortion, in this case, when they went the wrong way, the way they were going was morally wrong. And so same with marriage. I mean, God defines marriage. And so I think what it ultimately says is, when you have people that base their decisions ultimately on truth, on their deeply held religious beliefs, these are beliefs that go back thousands of years, they're unlikely to change those things. And that really is the anchor of our society. And so it is a fascinating, discussion as to whether it's not going to stop and you're going to see things turn around. Whether that takes 10 or 20 years or whatever, like in the abortion movement, it's anybody's guess, but it's an interesting sort of question that they posed.
Yeah, we'll have to post this. It's from the New Republic. I think I may write a commentary on this one, too. Very interesting and fascinating. Well, ladies and gentlemen, next up, we're going to talk about network coverage, not only of the Ebola, the reaction to the Ebola crisis, or Ebola coming into the U.S., but also this Supreme Court decision that non-decision that we've just been discussing. We're going to talk about how the media is looking at those things after this. Also, at our website are all the articles, or at least most of the ones that we're discussing today, plus the donate button, which we encourage you to use. Kelly Shackelford, Michael Berry are both here, and we will continue our weekend edition right after this.
To Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. You're listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
And in studio with me are Kelly Shackelford and Michael Berry, two attorneys from Liberty Institute who, well, it's always fun on Fridays to talk about our liberties and how they're being protected and challenged in various ways. And in one of those ways, I think, is through these gay marriage decisions, which ultimately end up in great, severe violations of our religious liberties. And sometimes when these things happen, as the Supreme Court, it was announced this Monday that they would not protect the marriage laws of various states, the media doesn't actually analyze it right or even pick it up well. And that's what the Media Research Center does. They take a look at the way the media handles some of our issues and helps us kind of understand that. And with us now to talk about that and also how the media has looked at some of the reactions to Ebola here in the U.S. is Dan Gainor. Dan Gainor is Vice President of Business and Culture for the Media Research Center. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, it's a pleasure, and thank you for having me on. Those are two very important topics, and you're right, they don't get covered properly in the media.
Well, the first topic, let's just start with the one that hit Monday when the Supreme Court basically said we're not going to hear appeals regarding same-sex marriage. And, you know, our attorneys that are sitting here, Kelly Shackelford and Mike Berry, they kind of expected the Supreme Court to say that, but talk about how the media handled it.
Well, the way the general, way journalists handle these things, it's a celebration. It's always a good thing. The more gay the country is, and often you'll find a lot of the reporters that later on you discover, oh, well, they were pushing an agenda. They came out 5 years later after they covered a story. Well, I watched 5 reports, 3 the night of and 2 the next morning that were very short. They included, at least by my count, 20 separate wedding photos. Gay couples.
Really?
Bombarded with that. 8 separate gay kisses, 7 lesbian couples, and 1 pair of guys. I mean, that's not pushing an agenda. That's outright declaring advocacy. There was one person on 5 reports who raised questions about it from the conservative side. That's it. That's all we get.
Wow. The gay kissing scenes, to me, that's way over the top and they shouldn't do it. But you know that it's trying to legitimize it. But the fact that they did not interview other people on the other side, because more than half of Americans still have a problem with same-sex marriage.
But see, they don't. Journalists don't. One of the things you'll find is that there are a couple commandments in the journalist Bible, and that is, thou shalt be fully supportive of gay marriage, and thou shalt be fully supportive of abortion. And so even people you think are technically conservative journalists often hew to the party line on those issues. And so the whole report is just you're bombarded with, oh, this is a wonderfully positive thing. And what you see on the networks, particularly on the gay issue, is you never see anything that makes gays look bad. We had a bizarre triad gay marriage case that involved a murder charge in D.C. Never made network news. If it had been a pastor and two people from his congregation involved in it, it would have made national news. But because some straight guy stays with someone he knows, and there's 3 people in the household, they're all involved together, and it becomes this ridiculously insane, awful court case, that doesn't get covered.
Dan, I know how Media Research Council, our center, all the time will do like all the reports. They'll count the number of times that they said one thing or the other. Did y'all do that kind of an analysis just on the gay marriage media that was out this week?
Well, not this week, because essentially what they did was, it's the celebration. So that's why we do the 20 different wedding photos, the 8 different gay kisses, because that's all it was. They focused on. Once more, happy couples, and you just see a parade. It's now legal in Virginia, and then you see a picture of somebody in Virginia, and then you jump to another state, And that was the way they covered it. And it's like going to a celebration. And that is, of course, the journalist's attitude.
Okay, let's move to the Ebola situation, because here in Dallas, we had this one patient die. He's the first person to be diagnosed with it here. And our reaction now is 5 airports starting tomorrow will be screening people coming in from the countries where Ebola is rampant. And, this has been portrayed by the media as a good thing that the government's doing it. But there are a lot of people that don't think it's enough. So just give us the stats that you guys have found with regard to the media reactions to that.
Well, what we did, nobody knows this, but back in 2010, Barack Obama actually overruled further screening policies that were been put in place by George Bush, and overruled them. They were supposed to go in action in 2010, canceled them. So, we looked at how are the media handling the issue of screening. 91% of the stories, they didn't even raise the issue that clearly is on the lips of every American. I mean, are we screening enough? Should we be quarantining, et cetera?
Should we be stopping the flights from those countries?
Right. And in not one story, not one, when Obama's instituting new screening policies, did they mention that, by the way, he's also the same guy who canceled the screening policies 4 years before.
Yeah. So we didn't get the full analysis. Why are we not surprised?
Yeah, that's an I mean, this is not about whether it's a right or wrong thing. Okay, this is the objective way journalists should cover something. If you are the person saying we need to institute stronger screening policies, and somebody says, well, by the way, you canceled stronger screening policies 4 years before, that most journalists should think that's important.
So that would be a one-line piece of information that could be added to the news report.
At the bare minimum, also should be questions they should be asking. The Obama press secretary, Josh Ernst. They should be saying, "Hello, wouldn't this be? Why didn't you do this back 4 years ago when the medical experts at the time said that was the thing to do?"
All right, let me ask you a question about this, because you look at the major networks, and we have other networks now. We have alternatives. We can watch Fox News, who's usually going to question the administration on things like this. So do we still, should we as Americans expect our broadcast news to be more objective, or should we just say, okay, we've got alternatives now, just let them go liberal, and we'll just assume that's what they are and take it as it is?
Well, I mean, first of all, as long as they claim they're neutral, we should have a right to hold them to that. They claim that they don't stick to the guidelines of the Society Professional Journalist Code of Ethics. So if I tell you that I'm a doctor and I have certain rules in my profession, you're going to hold me to those rules. If I'm a journalist, the same goes, especially if I tell you I'm a neutral journalist. Well, they're not neutral journalists. But a lot of Americans, while people understand that there's bias in the news, they don't understand the extent of it, how bad it is, how one-sided the stories are, and really the worst part is what they censor out of the news, what they refuse to tell you because it doesn't fit their agenda.
Dan, we just really appreciate you guys there at Media Research Center and the work that you do. We know it takes a lot of time and energy to do it, and thank you for the reports that you give us on just about every issue that concerns us, and for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much as well.
Okay, that's Dan Gainor from the Media Research Center. And it's just good to kind of look at the media. Of course, point of view is sort of an alternative in a sense, because we can help give you the truth. And that's what we try to do here on the show. And, I don't even watch broadcast news anymore. I don't feel like I'm getting the truth.
Well, and obviously from what Dan said, you don't. And it's sad. Good journalism should be good journalism. And you should, again, anybody who's doing a report that sees any politician say, hey, we're going to institute this, and then they find out that 4 years earlier they actually banned doing that. It's just a natural question to say, okay, why did you not do this 4 years ago, and why are you doing it now? That's kind of a basic question you ask, and nobody asked the question, and it's not, and that fact wasn't in any of the stories, and that's a disservice to the American people when the media acts that way and doesn't do their job.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's open up the phones. You can weigh in on this, 800-351-1212. How is the media doing on these stories? Do you have any comments about the news reports on especially Ebola. And next up, we're going to ask Michael Berry about the efforts to retain religious liberty, to protect religious liberty in the United States military. That's his expertise at Liberty Institute. And there are so many opportunities for him right now because we're seeing the rights of Christians in the military being greatly curtailed. So we'll do that, all of that, right after this. And again, the phone number is 800-351-1212. And also let me point you to the Point of View website, where you will get all the backup information for things that we've been talking about and the donate button, which we encourage you to use. We are a listener-supported ministry. We depend upon the gifts of listeners to keep this broadcast going every single day. Stay with us. A pro-life warrior died recently. Sandra Cano came to her activism on behalf of the sanctity of human life in a roundabout way. Sandra Cano was Mary Doe in the companion Supreme Court case to Roe v. Wade, Doe v. Bolton. This case opened the gates for legal abortion at any time during a pregnancy for any reason. Many pro-life leaders believe Doe was more instrumental than Roe in ushering in our current legal regime that protects abortion on demand. And yet, Sandra Cano wasn't even seeking an abortion. There's a movie coming out soon about Norma McCorvey, Jane Roe in Roe v. Wade. Like Norma, Sandra Cano was used to file this suit challenging Georgia's abortion law that helped topple pro-life laws across the country. The court's opinion in Doe v. Bolton stated that a woman may obtain an abortion even after viability, if necessary to protect her health. Today, most laws restricting abortion lack a health exception because the Supreme Court made such an exception wide enough to drive a Mack truck through. The Doe decision defined health to include considerations of physical, emotional, psychological, and familial health, and the woman's age as acceptable factors to allow abortions. This broadly defined health exception meant a woman could have a late abortion for essentially any reason. Sandra Cano told the Catholic Register, "It's a nightmare to be connected to a case that I never wanted to be connected to. Doe versus Bolton allows abortion up to the 9th month." A pregnant Cano was seeking a divorce and trying to get 2 of her children back from foster care. She went to a legal aid group, and unbeknownst to her, the case was filed on her behalf. She never sought an abortion. Her attorney, in connection with her mother, arranged an abortion for her at Grady Memorial Hospital. The hospital has no records. Sandra said that's because she never went there. She claimed her lawyer, Margie Pitts-Hamus, tricked her into signing the affidavit that formed the basis of the plaintiff's charges in Doe. Sandra fled to Oklahoma to avoid the pressure to have an abortion. Her attorney managed to persuade her to return and appear in court as a plaintiff in the initial hearing of the Doe case. "I can't understand," said Sandra, "how a case like this could go to the Supreme Court without anyone knowing or speaking to me to find out if what the attorney was presenting to the court was true. I was so ignorant. I didn't know there were 2 cases that legalized abortion." Years later, after putting the pieces together, Sandra Cano experienced tremendous guilt. But she became actively pro-life. She eventually filed a lawsuit attempting to overturn Doe versus Bolton. That effort was unsuccessful. Sandra Cano was a pawn used to bring abortion to the nation. Her story highlights what a slimy business abortion really is. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
It's your Friday weekend edition. I'm Penna Dexter. Kelly Shackelford and Michael Berry are here in the studio. And, in the United States military, normally it's been a bastion for people who love the country, often from Christian backgrounds. And lately, it's been sort of a laboratory for all kinds of social experimentation. And I think part of the result of that has been a lot of violations of the religious liberty of people in the military. And we can't allow it. We just simply cannot allow that to happen. And especially, Mike Berry, who you specialize in this, in the Air Force, there's a guy who, I don't know why he gets so much hearing because he's so radical. I've interviewed him before, who he claims that members of the Air Force, people serving in the Air Force, are being forced against their will to toe a Christian line in many cases. And he's always filing cases and complaining, and he has, at least in the past, he's had a lot of influence on policy in the Air Force. And I know that you've been kind of digging into what he's doing and the effect he's having. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the person you're referring to obviously is Mikey Weinstein. And, you know, he has a habit and a history of making outlandish claims specifically against Christians in the military. He has a particular, you know, animosity towards Christians in the military. And he likes to claim that the presence of Christians in the military is actually, he actually put this in a letter to Secretary of Defense Hagel and said that the actions and the influence of Christians in our military is turning our military into like a Christian version of ISIS, is what he said.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and he actually put this in this was in 78 pages of testimony that he was going to submit to Congress, as, you know, for a congressional hearing on military matters. And so, you know, things like that. And he called a Christian ministry that attempts to minister to the youth on military installations, that, you know, they just do youth ministry like you would have, you know, in your typical church. And he accused them of stalking these children on military bases. And this is all from this perspective of coercion. He says that it's because they're, you know, whenever you have a commanding officer or a superior officer and they put a Bible on their desk, then it sends this message of coercion that everybody in their command is now somehow has to become a Christian or believe what they do. Otherwise, they're going to be in trouble with this commander. You know, and having served in the military myself, I just find that to be ridiculous, because I've served with Christian commanding officers. I've served with homosexual commanding officers. I've served with commanding officers who go out to bars and drink, who use cuss words. Never once did I ever get the impression, nor did any of my colleagues ever get the impression, that if we didn't go to the bar and drink, that we were somehow going to be treated less preferentially, or that the ones who did go and drink would get treated better than we were treated, and or that if we had to use cuss words, otherwise our commander wasn't going to like us as much as he liked the guys that use cuss words. So this idea that our service members are not intelligent enough and don't have the enough integrity to be able to make up their own mind as to what they want to accept or reject is preposterous. And yet somehow Mikey Weinstein is able to gain an audience with prominent members of Congress, prominent officials in the Pentagon, and they actually listen to him on this. And unfortunately, the Air Force has been the one historically who's given him the greatest amount of influence, and that's why you see the Air Force having more of these religious hostility issues than any of the other branches in the military.
So I know that you at Liberty Institute, you are ready and able to help people in the military who have their religious liberty violated. Tell us kind of, you know, what's the latest on that at Liberty?
Well, the latest is that we were invited to testify on this matter before Congress back in September, and unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, that hearing was postponed. So we're waiting for them to announce the rescheduling date. But some of the other things we're doing is simply one of the most important things we can do is educate people, educate the American public. For example, one of the things that Mikey Weinstein put in his 78 pages is that basically a claim that our military chaplains, which have existed since before George Washington was President Washington, back when he was Colonel Washington in the Continental Army, he claims that they were basically non-existent between then and kind of the 20th century or the mid-20th century, that chaplains were non-existent. Well, that's nonsense. Obviously,
does he want to do away with chaplains?
I think he would want to do away with Christian chaplains. And it's very interesting that you bring that up.
I've heard of recently that they're trying to get someone in who's an atheist as a chaplain.
Yeah, a humanist chaplain.
A humanist? Okay.
And that's what's interestingly, you bring that up. He was recently interviewed by someone else. And in this interview, the interviewer was pretty clever about this. He began asking a series of questions about, you claim that you're in favor of religious freedom. So would you be in favor of any, and he brought up a hypothetical or a fact pattern with a Muslim, with somebody who is Jewish, somebody who is Hindu, somebody who is, basically other religions, and he was kind of walking Mikey Weinstein down the primrose path and saying, you would support these religious expressions, right? And Mikey was going along with things, saying, yeah, we would support that. We would support that. And then he changed topics slightly, and then later on came back and said, well, let's say we had a Christian that was doing this. And that's when Mikey put his foot down and said, no. And so he was okay with other religions. Once you got to Christianity, that's where he really had the problem. And that's why I publicly will say that Mikey Weinstein has an anti-Christian bias, and he attacks Christians in our military. And time and again, that's why we see Christians who I recently did some statistical analysis looking at some surveys that the military had done. Our military is predominantly Christian. The vast majority, approximately 65% or so, identify themselves as being of some denomination of the Christian faith, and yet so therefore we have a religious force in our military by their own admission, and yet the people who want to have a humanist chaplain, people like Mikey Weinstein, want to diminish their influence in the military and eliminate them and basically tell them, you have to go into the closet with your faith if you're going to serve in uniform. You can't say anything at all about your faith, because that coerces others into feeling like they have to believe as you do.
Mm-hmm. So this is such a problem now that it has to be, in a sense, Kelly, proactively opposed. And that's what Liberty Institute is about right now, correct?
Yeah, we've done a lot of different things, and Michael Berry has done a lot of different things that I think have already started to see a real impact. And number one is we now have a list of what are your rights in the military and what freedoms do you have if you're in the service, and they can go and look at that. They can get that material from us. We have an 800 number that we have actually advertised in the Military Times and in the newspapers and things they would see, to let them know there's a place to call if they're threatened because of their faith in any way, or they just want an answer to a question about what freedoms they have. So we have already starting to see, I think, a big change, just because, as Michael mentioned, Mikey Weinstein was yelling and screaming, and
he tends to do that
for whatever reason. They listened to that. They're like, well, okay, we don't want to cause any trouble. And there was nobody on the other side. And when we came in on the other side and started providing what the law really is in these situations, if you're paying close attention, you notice now that when Mikey Weinstein screams and yells, they're really somewhat ignoring him now. They're disagreeing with him, which is what they should have done from the beginning. But the point is, it's been very important for us to be on the other side, to provide the real information on what the law says, what the Constitution says, the rights. I mean, not only is it okay to have religious freedom in the military, our military is going to be a very poor military if people don't have the freedom to access their faith, their belief in God, and to be able to talk about those things.
Yeah, it's a great point that Kelly brought up, that for a while, Mikey Weinstein was the only voice in the room. And he puts himself out as a constitutional expert and a religion expert, and I think that had part of the reason to do with people listening to him. And so it's so great that Liberty Institute was able to come along and say, wait a minute, here's the real truth about what our rights are, the rights of our service members are in the military. And I think once that message started to get out, we started to slow the tide of Mikey's influence.
And we'll be back after these messages.
Across the nation, this is Point of View. For materials offered during the broadcast, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
I love it when filmmakers take issues that concern us here in the United States of America and make documentaries about them, especially when they take unfair things that happen perpetrated by our government agencies and show us the truth. And that's what's happening with this new movie that's coming out, Unfair. It's a 90-minute documentary. We've got a trailer of that, and we're going to play it, and you're going to hear voices like Mike Huckabee, Grover Norquist from Americans for Tax Reform, Brian Brown from National Organization for Marriage, Representative Trey Gowdy of South Carolina, Ted Cruz, Glenn Beck, and some leaders of some organizations who have had their rights infringed upon by the IRS. This is a trailer from the movie Unfair.
We're here to protest the terrible injustice set upon the American people.
What's your name?
I'm not sure if I say it, maybe the IRS would be coming after me.
The IRS has become a criminal enterprise, much like the mafia, except the mafia operates with at least the honor of not whacking the women and the children.
This has been going on for decades.
A lot of answers have been brought up, from abolishing the IRS. I also think some people need to be put in jail.
If a defendant in court changed his or her defense 6 different times, what would you call that?
It's not just conservatives, it's not just the Tea Party.
It's just about too much power in Washington.
They sent us a letter saying we owed right at $50,000. Well, we had to pay it or close up.
You know, we're all volunteers. You know, we don't get paid for this. We do it because we love liberty and we love freedom.
And here I'm being accosted by this IRS agent.
Why are the American people not demanding that we padlock their doors?
We want to make the moral case that it is un-American to violate your 1st, 4th, 5th, 7th, and 8th Amendment rights with this system.
This doesn't just potentially affect us, this affects everyone.
If it can happen to us, it can happen to you.
Where can we go? Where do you run away to from the United States of America?
With us to talk about the upcoming movie Unfair is Craig Bergman. He's one of the producers. He's also a nationally syndicated radio talk show host. Craig, thank you for joining us.
Hey, it is my pleasure to be with you.
When is the movie supposed to come out?
Well, it is a one-night-only event that is this Tuesday, the 14th of October, 7 p.m., and that's 7 p.m. Eastern. And then an hour later, we'll start again, 7 p.m. Central, and work its way all the way across to Hawaii.
It's going to be at theaters, local theaters across the country?
About 700 of them, coast to coast, and in the rest of the other 2 states as well. So, yes.
So what's the reason for just this one night?
Well, that's kind of the money reason. To play in Hollywood, it takes millions of dollars to get a film released nationwide for more than a night, and we decided to follow a model that has been used by Glenn Beck and Kirk Cameron and Jim Dobson and other folks like that, and it's called the one-night event model, and so that's what we have. We picked this night because it's far enough away from the elections to not be a distraction, but close enough that people are paying attention.
Yeah, I think people are paying attention to the IRS. It's been exposed recently, and you certainly add to that via the movie, don't you?
Yes, we really do, and we take a look not just at the current events, but we make the moral case against the tax system and against the IRS over the last 100 years.
So are you coming at this from, for instance, because I've heard a lot of nonprofit leaders speak in the trailer, this whole idea that the IRS was delaying and denying tax-exempt status to organizations who had some problem with our federal government?
Well, that's one of the issues we look at, but we also look at the broader issue. For example, the nonprofit section of the IRS code has 29 exemptions. Most people in our sphere of influence think about a C3 or a C4, sure, but there's also C5, C6, C29. And when the government says, based on whom you wish to freely associate and based on what you believe, we're going to give you different tax consequences, that's un-American.
And let me ask you first, I mean, it's kind of obvious, I think, but I want to make sure the listeners get this. When you say it's the movie is coming out on, this coming Tuesday, the 14th, what you're saying is that if enough people go to the movie on Tuesday the 14th in these 700 theaters, then it'll get wider play and it can start moving for more than one day, but it'll depend upon the numbers of people that come out the first night.
Well, that's only partially true. If it does very well the first night, we may get what they call an encore a week later on the 21st or even again on the 28th. But it is truly a limited release. That's our contract. And our distributor does not have the ability to open it up in 1,000 theater screens for 3 weeks. This will not happen without, just some kind of mad outpouring and millions of people being turned away. But we expect several 100,000 people to be able to see it in the theater before we go to DVD.
And tell the listeners what's the main message that people are going to see. I know there's a lot of different examples I'm sure that are used, but sort of if people were to leave the movie with like one line or whatever, what do you think that would be? What's the theme?
Well, the one line I would leave them with, and before I say it, I'm going to preface it by saying I am a long-time listener to the program, first-time caller. But the theme I would have for this audience especially and the broader audience is that tax policy is moral policy. The value voters, of which I am one and been one for many years, have this propensity to think very absolute terms on things like marriage or abortion. But when it comes to economic policy, we believe whatever the politicians tell us if they say they're for lower taxes or whatever, and we need to change that. We need to have the same abolitionist mentality against this corrupt system that's taking our religious liberties away and oppressing us that we do on these other matters, because the tax code is what's responsible for these other ills.
Craig, I want to ask you about something you mentioned a moment ago. You alluded to the nonprofit organizations and particularly those that are maybe religious ministries or religious organizations. What is your take on the recent news articles about the Freedom from Religion Foundation sort of bullying the IRS into agreeing that it will begin examining the tax-exempt status of churches and other religious organizations?
Well, we definitely cover that in the movie very heavily, because this started in 1954 when Lyndon Johnson passed a 27-word amendment to the IRS tax code that first began infringing on the rights of nonprofits to be political. Now, we've had some rulings like Citizens United that have gone the other way, but the IRS has been very careful in how they've targeted conservative groups, Christian groups, and especially churches, because they
Hey, Craig, can I jump in? Do you have a few more minutes to stay with us after the break?
I certainly do.
Okay, great. Craig Bergman will continue to speak about this movie, Unfair, and you can also go to pointofview.net and find out more.
The Point of View Commentary with Kirby Anderson.
Perhaps you've read the short story of I, Pencil by economist Leonard Read. He takes you through all the steps necessary to make a pencil and concludes that nobody knows how to make a pencil. To make something as simple as a pencil requires knowledge and technological expertise in fields ranging from forestry to mining to engineering to chemistry. And yet pencils are made day after day, even though no one knows the whole process from start to finish. The worker on the assembly line doesn't know all the steps. Even the president of the pencil manufacturing company doesn't know all that is necessary to make a pencil. There's no central authority. All of the necessary steps come together in a free market through what looks like spontaneous order. Kevin Williamson, in a recent column, talks about how the market worked to provide us with so much more than just pencils. When he speaks to students, he shows them a still from the Oliver Stone movie Wall Street. The financier Gordon Gekko is talking on a cell phone, the Motorola Dynex 8000. The students always laugh. There's good reason. The phone is more than a foot long and weighs a couple of pounds. But here's the point. In the day in which the movie was shot, you had to be a millionaire to have one. The phone cost the equivalent of $10,000. It also cost more than $1,000 a month to operate. You couldn't put it in your pocket. You couldn't text on it. You couldn't get on the internet on it. You couldn't play Angry Birds on it. Most of the students have a smartphone that does that and much, much more. Every day they hold in their hands a technological wonder, especially compared to what only the rich and privileged few could use a few years ago. And while the price of nearly everything is going up, the price of these phones has dropped dramatically. It is worth mentioning that if no one knows how to make a pencil, it is certainly true that nobody knows how to make a smartphone. Yet we have them in our hands because of the free market. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Craig Bergman is on the line with us. He's the producer of this new movie about the IRS called Unfair, and it's opening actually for one night this Tuesday. Craig, tell us more about how people can find out where it is in their community.
Certainly. Our distributor is Fathom Events, so you can go to their website, fathomevents.com, put in your zip code, find a theater near you. It's in 700 theaters nationwide, so it's about an hour from everyone. Our website, of course, is unfairmovie.com, and we're looking for theater captains who want to help us organize in the theaters, and it's especially important if we do get an encore that we're able to get word out to people about a second showing in the future.
So if someone wants to be a theater captain, what do they do?
Well, they go to unfairmovie.com, They click the theater captain button, and if your theater doesn't have a captain yet, we'll send you T-shirts, posters, tickets, free flag.
Great. And you can also just go through pointofview.net, and we've got a button there that you can hit for the Unfair Movie, or just Unfair the Movie or Unfair Movie?
Unfairmovie.com. You put the in on our Facebook page. It's kind of weird that we had them at two different times that way. So it's unfairmovie.com. Or on Facebook, Unfair the Movie.
I think I had to jump in when you were answering Michael's question, which had to do with the IRS and the Johnson Amendment. And now that the IRS has made sort of an agreement, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure, I'll pick it back up. The thing of it is if we understand the principle that the rights as articulated by our founding fathers and documented in the Bill of Rights are an inalienable endowment from our Creator, then we can't have subsequent amendments or laws that abridge those freedoms and still be a free people. So the Johnson Amendment is blatantly unconstitutional. It needs to be challenged in court. And what the Congress is trying to do now, Senator Reid, they know it's unconstitutional, so they're actually proposing an amendment to the First Amendment, if you can believe such a preposterous notion could be floated in this day and age.
Craig, Kelly Shackelford here. We actually have a client who's deposed in connection with the big IRS lawsuit. We have a Jewish client who was focused on heavily by the IRS because they actually were supportive of Israel, of all things. How dare they? And so there have been a number of these lawsuits. I'm curious, are you covering the sort of any of that, the big lawsuits over what happened to all these people? I can think of all the ones with the nonprofits like Penna was referencing earlier, and then I also think of the special one that the National Organization for Marriage had, where the IRS agent actually violated it was a felony by taking their private tax return and giving it to the Human Rights Campaign or something. Do you cover that in the movie as well?
We cover all of those. We cover the National Organization for Marriage issue. We cover the lawsuits. We cover the targeting. I mean, the federal government putting Jews on a list. Hey, the last time there was a government on earth that tried that, it ended up very bad for everyone involved. And America, to think that we're at the day and age right now where the government thinks they can say, papers, please. It's frightening.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Craig, so much for letting us know about this opportunity this Tuesday night. And, ladies and gentlemen, go to pointofview.net or just unfairmovie.com. Find out what theater it's playing at Tuesday night. Go out and see it. Bring your friends and support it so that perhaps it can get a little broader distribution after that. So thank you, Craig. We appreciate you joining us today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to open up the phones now. We've had a lot of guests today on Point of View, so we'll let you weigh in at 800-351-1212. But Mike, since I've got Mike Berry here and Kelly Shackelford, and we've been talking a little bit earlier in the program about the military and about protecting the rights of Christians in the military, who comprise more than a majority of people that are serving, to have chaplains, to be able to speak their faith. Not that they have to go beat people over the head with it, but we've been taking it the wrong direction. And it's time for us to come back now and shore this up. I mean, we, Mike, we Americans, we owe such a great debt of gratitude to the people that are serving us in the armed forces. It's the least we can do to work to protect their rights, to their own First Amendment rights to express their faith, isn't it?
Yeah, and just, for our listeners out there, one of the things that service members, really one of the small tokens that we will often do to show our gratitude for those who have served and sacrificed, and some who paid the ultimate sacrifice, is we create monuments and memorials to them. And most people are familiar with seeing these, and for those who've ever been to Washington, D.C., certainly Arlington Cemetery is a very solemn reminder of what it means to serve and sacrifice on behalf of your nation. And what's amazing, though, and what's really outrageous, is that there are groups out there, powerful, well-funded groups, who want to erase these monuments and memorials that, in most cases, were put there by service members to remember their brothers and sisters who fell on the battlefield. And these groups, simply because the object that the service members chose to use to honor and remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice, might contain a cross, or might contain a reference to Scripture that says, greater love has no man than he that would lay down his life for his friend or his brother, something like that. And they say that is offensive to people, that's not a proper way to honor the fallen. And they file lawsuits to have them removed. And so at Liberty Institute, certainly one of the most important things we can do is to defend these monuments and memorials, and we're doing so from coast to coast. I mean, literally from coast to coast, from Mount Soledad Veterans Memorial in La Jolla, California, to the Bladensburg Peace Cross in Bladensburg, Maryland. It's happening from coast to coast, and really, I don't think any town is safe. And most people are often surprised when they just do a little bit of research and find, oh, wait, we have a Veterans Memorial right here in our town or in our county. And, oh, look at that. It was put up back in 1930 to honor the guys, the doughboys that went over and fought in World War I. And yet here we are in 2014, and they may find themselves the subject of a lawsuit to have that memorial torn down. So, that's one of the things that I think many service members and veterans, and I think the American public in general, need to know is happening in our country right now as we speak.
Do you think most service members, just the rank and file, know that there's actually an attack on their memorials?
No, actually, it's a great question, and I don't think that they're totally aware of that. In fact, when I was on active duty and serving, I heard a few rumblings and grumblings and some rumors, but we never really got the full story. We didn't understand what the backstory was. All we knew is there's a bunch of lawyers involved, and so no.
Now you're one of them.
Yeah, and so. And proud to say that I'm fighting on for the good guys on this one. And that's the thing is that I hear many service members say, just leave us alone. Let us honor those with whom we served. Let us honor them in the way that we want to honor them. And if somebody else wants to honor them in a different way, then let them do so as well. There's certainly plenty to go around when it comes to that. And so, and the other thing is, going back to a topic we were talking about earlier, is when you start to have this hostility against religious expression and religious freedom in the military, it has such a chilling effect on others. One easy example would be there's actually military training manuals out there that to this day contain language that equate people of faith or conservatives, or, for example, evangelical Christians, people who identify with the Tea Party movement, and it equates them with being hate groups or even domestic terror threats. And when somebody reads that, I've actually had service members call me and say, Mr. Berry, does that mean that if I want to give money to my church that I'm now a material supporter of terror? Because as we know, that's illegal in this country. That's illegal in the military. Am I going to be punished for doing that? And so they'll stop doing that. They'll stop supporting their churches, stop supporting religious ministries, and they'll stop being who they are, which is the last thing that we can afford to do in our military. There's a great saying that America's most powerful weapon is not some nuclear destroyer or some new stealth aircraft. It's the American service member who's willing to fight and possibly even give up his life for something that is much larger than himself. He's willing to fight for an idea, a way of life. And if he doesn't have the moral foundation to understand where that comes from, he's not going to fight for that anymore. Then our military becomes nothing more than just paid mercenaries.
If you would like to weigh in on this issue, especially if you have known anyone or yourself had your religious liberties violated in the military, give us a call at 800-351-1212. The thing that worries me, and we can talk about this more after the break, is that people just won't flat out join the military because they'll begin to see, that it's become a different kind of institution than it's been traditionally, and so that we won't have our best and our brightest joining, and that would be a great loss for the nation, and it would affect our national security too.
Well, and I know everybody out there might be saying, maybe they're not in the military, but they probably know somebody who's either a veteran or is currently serving. When we come back, we'll give them something they can do that's real easy that'll help all of those individuals.
We'll do that right after this. Stay with us for more of Point of View.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
We've got the final half hour before us of our Friday weekend edition of Point of View, and we do want to make sure you know that you can call in at 800-351-1212 to talk about really any of the subjects we've talked about today on the program. We started out with the issue that the networks, or that the gay marriage decision by the Supreme Court, actually a non-decision not to protect the marriage laws of various states, came down this week, and the networks acted like it was an event to celebrate. And if you have any comments or questions about that decision, you can give us a call. And then we brought up the Ebola situation, and is the government doing enough? Should we be stopping flights from some of these countries where it's a real crisis? A lot of people have opinions on that. And then we've got the Unfair movie. You can talk about the IRS, and certainly two experts on religious liberty, especially within the U.S. military. Michael Berry is at Liberty Institute doing that, and also Kelly Shackelford, our regular co-host on Fridays. And Kelly, I just think that at this point in the program, it would be good to open up the phones and let people just sort of weigh in on things that they've seen in the U.S. military or their concerns about a government that would abridge the rights of those who are serving.
Yeah, and one of the things I mentioned before we went to break is something that everybody can do. I mean, if somebody's listening and they either have a relative or a friend or someone who's in the military or somebody who is a veteran, one of the things they can do is share the information. For instance, at libertyinstitute.org, they could click on issues in military, and we list a lot of the things of what are the rights. There's an 800 number where they can call. And I think that's a lot of times just key, that that there's some place you can go and get good information. And in our case, they can call. It's a confidential call. It's attorney-client relationship type thing. So that's what people need, is some place they can go to, because they're not experts and they're in a difficult situation, and they just need to know what their options are. And the more people that knew what rights people have, the less that those kind of violations would occur.
I think our listeners are all very familiar with Philip Monk, who is your client, and he is in the Air Force, and he's about to retire, and he almost didn't even get that far because of demands by a superior that he affirm same-sex marriage. But there's another client that I did not know about that you actually have helped in the Army. Michael, tell us about him and what actually was accomplished for him.
Yeah, well, that's right. This is a lieutenant colonel who's in the Army, and he's actually a commanding officer, and he was sent a new Army policy directive basically saying that for same-sex soldiers, for homosexual soldiers who are clearly now allowed to serve openly in the Army, that commanding officers were to grant them 10 days of uncharged, meaning free leave. So basically they got 10 free days to travel out of state and get a same-sex marriage if they were stationed in a state that didn't recognize same-sex marriage. And so he simply, he's a commanding officer, so it falls under his responsibility, but he's also a Christian, and he simply wanted to know and voice his concern over this policy of saying, first of all, does this apply evenly to heterosexual soldiers? Can I give them 10 free days? And the answer is no. They have to take leave like anybody else. And he said, well, I have a problem with that because I don't think that it's being applied evenly, right? That now we're giving special status or special privileges to homosexual soldiers that we're not giving to heterosexual soldiers. And he was immediately threatened with a career-ending punishment as a result of his statement. And he contacted Liberty Institute. We represented him, and he had about 30 days to kind of submit what's called a rebuttal, which is really just a defense of his position and why. It was a two-star general basically told him, you convinced me why we shouldn't fire you, why we shouldn't end your career right now. And so that's what we did. And the interesting thing is that I really wasn't sure how this general was going to respond to this quite lengthy rebuttal that we put together. in defense of our client. And the general, much to my surprise and fortunately, agreed with everything that we had said. And in fact, he not only decided not to punish our client, but he physically ripped up the paper that the punishment was written on and threw it away and said, we're just going to act like this never happened. And then he said, now here's what I want you to do. I want you to go around and train all of your colleagues on how to effectively dissent when you're in the military and you're a commanding officer and you're faced with a situation like you were faced with. How do you effectively and respectfully dissent? So instead of being punished, he was actually given a platform to kind of explain. And one of the really interesting and neat things that came about was our client told me that the general's attitude was kind of a little bit of one of surprise and saying, I learned a lot through this myself. I didn't realize that there were all these cases that you guys cited that said that our service members have more rights than I realized that they did, and I'm glad that you kind of brought this to our attention, and so there was actually some learning that occurred there on all sides, and so that was really refreshing, and to see a general who most generals are very intelligent, educated men that actually took what we said to heart and really listened to the arguments that were presented, and in the end did the right thing and gave our client the opportunity to share that.
I think that's also so helpful to know if you are a person that's facing something like this, because these can be real dilemmas in someone's life. And, and you can run into legal bills or whatever. And so you need help. And it's good that people are beginning to understand and know that there is help when they're facing this kind of discrimination. Correct?
That's right. And not only is there help, but I mean, I think the most important thing that I can convey to service members or friends and family of service members is history and law is on their side. They don't have to be scared. And in this environment right now where service members are scared to act or to be who they are when it comes to their faith is unnecessary and it's dangerous. Something Kelly mentioned earlier is it actually harms our nation. It weakens our military, which is a national security concern. And I don't mean to overstate the case, but and I know that Kelly, I was with him when he spoke with the Naval Academy. There were midshipmen and sailors lined up to talk to him afterwards, and I'll let him
So it's a felt need.
What happened?
Yeah, well, a number of those people that came up, the most common question I got, and there was all one-on-one in private, but there's a line of people. The most common thing that everybody asked me was, I'm a Christian. Should I just get out of here because of what they were experiencing?
I think I would say as a mom, we're Christians. I don't know if it's a great place for you to be anymore.
And I encouraged them. I said, no. I said, if you're not there, how is the light going to get there? They're the only hope. People that are willing to do the right thing, no matter what they're told, even though they're being given messages that are not good. And so we've got to have good people be there to change things and to get them back to what our military was founded upon and what it's been like for most of our existence. And again, I'm starting to see some of that happen, but it's going to take a focused effort, and that's why we're really committed to that. We had always at Liberty Institute had religious freedom, in our schools, for our churches and religious organizations, and in the public arena, and we had to open a whole division just for the military because it's that important. And what's great is Michael's mentioned in the case, you mentioned Sergeant Monk, and Michael just mentioned this other one, but there are other people who call and just get answers to questions, and it's a hierarchical system there. It's an authority chain, and so it's very difficult if you're in a chain of command and you're in a conflict situation, and especially if you don't know what your rights are and you don't know what the law is. So to be able to have somewhere they can call and to make sure that everybody has the fullest freedom that they truly have. It's not only in the Constitution, it's also in federal law. A lot of these things, they're written out. And so we can tell them the freedoms they have, which I think gives confidence to them to then be who they are and be open about who they are.
Yeah, I just can't imagine if there weren't the ability to have faith in the United States military when people are putting their actual lives, their futures on the line to fight for our country. and that you would not be able to openly worship your God or speak about the Lord to other people. I was so surprised when Sergeant Monk said that he had people under his command in Iraq that didn't even know he was a Christian, and he didn't know they were Christians because they hadn't spoken about those things. So that atmosphere has existed for a long time, and to be able to open that up and allow people to speak, not that you would, as Mikey Weinstein says, force people to be Christians in the military. No, that's not what we're talking about. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've got one more segment. If you want to weigh in on this, we certainly would be happy for you to do so. And but we're going to continue our discussion with Kelly Shackelford and Mike Berry about our liberties in this country to speak about our Lord. A pro-life warrior died recently. Sandra Cano came to her activism on behalf of the sanctity of human life in a roundabout way. Sandra Cano was Mary Doe in the companion Supreme Court case to Roe v. Wade, Doe v. Bolton. This case opened the gates for legal abortion at any time during a pregnancy for any reason. Many pro-life leaders believe Doe was more instrumental than Roe in ushering in our current legal regime that protects abortion on demand. And yet, Sandra Cano wasn't even seeking an abortion. There's a movie coming out soon about Norma McCorvey, Jane Roe in Roe v. Wade. Like Norma, Sandra Cano was used to file this suit challenging Georgia's abortion law that helped topple pro-life laws across the country. The court's opinion in Doe v. Bolton stated that a woman may obtain an abortion even after viability, if necessary to protect her health. Today, most laws restricting abortion lack a health exception because the Supreme Court made such an exception wide enough to drive a Mack truck through. The Doe decision defined health to include considerations of physical, emotional, psychological, and familial health, and the woman's age as acceptable factors to allow abortions. This broadly defined health exception meant a woman could have a late abortion for essentially any reason. Sandra Cano told the Catholic Register, "It's a nightmare to be connected to a case that I never wanted to be connected to. Doe v. Bolton allows abortion up to the 9th month. A pregnant Cano was seeking a divorce and trying to get 2 of her children back from foster care. She went to a legal aid group, and unbeknownst to her, the case was filed on her behalf. She never sought an abortion. Her attorney, in connection with her mother, arranged an abortion for her at Grady Memorial Hospital. The hospital has no records. Sandra said that's because she never went there. She claimed her lawyer, Margie Pitts-Hamus, tricked her into signing the affidavit that formed the basis of the plaintiff's charges in Doe. Sandra fled to Oklahoma to avoid the pressure to have an abortion. Her attorney managed to persuade her to return and appear in court as a plaintiff in the initial hearing of the Doe case. "I can't understand," said Sandra, "how a case like this could go to the Supreme Court without anyone knowing or speaking to me to find out if what the attorney was presenting to the court was true. I was so ignorant. I didn't know there were 2 cases that legalized abortion." Years later, after putting the pieces together, Sandra Cano experienced tremendous guilt. But she became actively pro-life. She eventually filed a lawsuit attempting to overturn Doe v. Bolton. That effort was unsuccessful. Sandra Cano was a pawn used to bring abortion to the nation. Her story highlights what a slimy business abortion really is. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
One of the things we like to do here on Point of View is talk about what the Supreme Court is up to, what kinds of cases they're hearing, especially the cases that have to do with some kind of religious liberty. And, of course, all this week in the news has been the marriage cases and the fact that the Supreme Court rejected the appeals from Indiana, Oklahoma, Utah, Virginia, and Wisconsin. They'd had their marriage amendments and laws struck down by an appeals court, and the Supreme Court refused to reverse that. At least for now, that's not happening. And that's been the big news with the Supreme Court. And that certainly, we all know that those marriage cases affect our religious liberty big time. It's being used as a sort of a spear to, it's sort of the tip of the spear right now with religious liberty. But there are a lot of other cases out there that involve our liberties, and There was one before the Supreme Court that we haven't mentioned all week, Kelly. And since you guys are here, I want you to talk about it because sometimes it doesn't always involve Christianity.
Yeah, the case was involved a prisoner who, out of his religious faith, needed to wear a beard, which is about a half-inch thick. And the correctional facilities refused. They had a policy against that because they said it could be a security issue. They could hide something in there, in their beard, and or they could shave and change their appearance quickly. And so that was the argument. Well, it made it up to the Supreme Court, and we filed a brief. And Fox News, I know, had an editorial by us because we were on the pro-religious liberty side. Because as Justice Alito in the oral argument, it was fairly funny, asked, he sort of said, well, couldn't you, when the prison side got up for their argument, he said, couldn't you just force them to run a comb through it and if a gun fell out or something like that, and everybody started laughing.
Beard.
Yeah, that was his point is look, they're really not hiding things, and most states don't have any such, regulation in their correctional facilities. So he was pointing out is a little unreasonable, and they seem to not want to accommodate people's religion. And so it sounded like from the oral argument that it might go fairly well for the pro-religious freedom side. Our brief that we filed was really about how important faith is in the prisons in actually helping to change the lives of those prisoners. And so it is really important to do all you can in the prison to allow for faith to have an impact on their lives. You've got things like prison fellowships, interchange program, and many others that have had tremendous results. And so, when people start saying, well, you can't have a Bible because you might hide something in it, you can't have you start getting into these type of things, it really needs to be valid. It really needs to be a security issue. If it's a security issue, then obviously I think everybody would say, you've got to have security and control. But these sort of fabricated defenses because you don't want people to have religious freedom because, they're prisoners, is actually kind of foolish because you'll actually have a more, a better group that acts better if you allow them to have more faith, and you'll have less crime when they get out and coming back in if you allow for that growth in their faith.
Well, I do have one question about that, though, because I know that the prisons across the country are hotbeds of radical Islam being spread and also being sort of allowed to fester inside the prisons. And so what about that? To be consistent, we need to really protect the rights of all faiths and religions to, at least in a reasonable manner, be practiced. But
yeah, well, the one in this case was a Muslim. The beard was a Muslim, and despite that, all the Christian groups, that I know of, okay. Our group, we filed a brief saying this is about the principle. Now, if there's a difference between wearing a beard and establishing Sharia law, which violates the Constitution and tells women they don't have equal rights and says we're going to kill people who won't convert. Those are obviously not protectable things under our Constitution and in our system. But otherwise, yeah, we want everybody, even people we disagree with, has the right to, worship God in the way they want to, as long as it doesn't, again, involve other people being harmed, etc. Or in the case of the prisons, as long as it doesn't involve a danger to health or safety, because there are security issues, obviously, in prison.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is we're about ready to wrap up Point of View today, and we thank you for your participation this week with all the programs. I want to point you right now to the Point of View website for so many things. Number one, the articles that have to do with the issues that we've been discussing today, and also the button that allows you to find out more about the movie Unfair, which will be showing in theaters across the country November 14th, 7 p.m. in whatever locality you're in. You can see the trailer there. And I do want to mention to you the Pray, Organize, Vote button. We have all kinds of election resources ready for you. And of course, we're coming up on a very, very important election. And inside there, you can find out, you can actually find out about registration deadlines. You can find voter guides from all sorts of organizations. You can find out what your rights are as a church. I think, as a matter of fact, Kelly Liberty Institute has provided some of the rights of churches with regard to voting right now. And that's an important area where pastors can make a real difference in the future. Maybe you could give us a couple of those.
It's a really it's a really short, just a one-page deal that just says what, pastors or churches and elections, what's the law. And the main thing is, obviously, pastors in their individual capacity can do whatever they want. I mean, they can be the chairman of somebody's campaign if they want to. They can be the finance chair. The question being asked usually is, what about the church entity? And the church entity is a nonprofit, and what can it, do and not do? And the reality is, the only things it can't do are things that I've never known any church to want to do, and that is you can't endorse as a church one candidate over another.
That's about the only thing you can't do, though,
yeah,
right?
And you can't give money or resources to one candidate. Again, I've never seen churches say, hey, we're going to pull money right out of the church coffer and give it to candidate A. But all the things that church want to do, they can do, which is educate their those in their congregation about what the Bible says about all these issues, educate, like with the voters' guides, their congregation on where all the candidates stands on the issues. They can even invite the two, if there's two candidates or three candidates, they can even invite them to address the church. They can, do voter registration. They can, all the stuff that churches would want to do, which is really to bring the Bible to bear to how they should vote as a Christian, and the fact that they should vote as a Christian. Those are all things that are totally protected, and there's no question. So really, a lot of the things that, the fearfulness and the, oh, we can't do this are almost all false, because again, the very few things that nonprofit entities are not supposed to do with regard to, campaigns, no church ever really would want to do. And so it's really a matter of total freedom. And really, I think it's the pastor's job. If you look at Ephesians, where it says the job is to equip the saints for works of service. And I think equipping the saints in all areas of life is what pastors are supposed to do. So how do you, as a Christian, go and vote? How do you act as a citizen in the freedoms that the Lord has given us here, and how are you going to steward those? I mean, we get the chance to pick a leader, and other people, they have their leader around the world. They have their leader foisted on them. They don't live in a free society like we do. We've been given an incredible privilege to choose good over evil, and better policy over policy that would harm people, and we have the truth. So there's a responsibility for us to go in that voting booth and represent Christ, and which would positively affect people all over the country.
I think the right to vote is really a matter of stewardship, and there's a sense in which we've been given something very precious in this country that people don't have in other countries, and we ought to use it. And I get a little sort of upset about pastors who pull back from that encouragement to people to vote and be involved in the political arena. And I think it's important for pastors to encourage people in their churches to actually go out and serve, run for office if they're so inclined. And churches should get behind those people. I mean, no, you can't endorse them. No, you can't give them money, but you can certainly give them spiritual support and pray for them and all of that. So it's a good word here at the end of the program as we move into election season. And so go to pointofview.net, check out all of our resources. You can get the rights of churches that Liberty Institute has provided there. That's right in the middle of the website. Up in the right-hand corner is the green donate button, which we ask that you take full advantage of. And I want to thank you, Andrew, Catherine, and Chris, for all you did to produce the show today. And ladies and gentlemen, have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
You have been listening to Point of View. For materials offered on the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.